My name is Tammy Evans. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how my father's pride became the very rope that unraveled his empire at the hands of the daughter he never wanted to see. If anyone had asked me what it feels like to be invisible to your own family, I would have told them, you don't feel invisible. You feel like furniture, always there, rarely acknowledged, and only noticed when you're in the way. I was born in Austin, Texas. The youngest of 3 children in the Evans family, Mason, Carter, and me. To the outside world, we were the perfect family. My dad, Douglas Evans, was a respected finance executive at Orion Ventures. My mom, Lorraine, the image of Southern grace. And my brothers? Mason was the golden child, smart, charismatic, and ruthless in a suit. Carter was the family's athletic prodigy, the kind of boy who could trip over a ball and still get cheered. And me? I was just Tammy, the one who drew on napkins and stayed quiet at dinner. My earliest memory of feeling like an afterthought came when I was 12. I'd won first place in a citywide art competition. My painting, a vibrant piece about urban loneliness, was hung in the Austin Civic Gallery. I came home, clutching the certificate in both hands, heart beating like a drum. Dad was on the couch, eyes glued to the screen as Mason scored a goal in some school championship rerun. I stood beside him, waiting. Dad, I won, look. He glanced at the certificate, muttered good, and turned back to the screen without even asking what it was about. Not 5 minutes later, Carter came in with a bronze trophy from a regional soccer match. Dad jumped up like the Pope had just visited. Now, that's what I'm talking about. That's my boy, he said, clapping Carter on the back. I stood there, my certificate crushed in my hands like a wrinkled receipt. Mom tried to smooth things over later, saying, your father doesn't understand art, Tammy. It's not you, it's him. But it always felt like it was me. Like I didn't shine enough. Like I didn't matter. So I tried harder. I joined every club. Started a weekend art class for kids with disabilities. Volunteered at the community center. Earned a full-ride academic scholarship at 16. But my father's response to every accomplishment was always the same indifferent nod, followed by praise for Mason's startup or Carter's latest headline. When I got accepted into Parsons School of Design in New York with a scholarship, I thought surely this would be the moment. I stood in the living room, hands trembling, paint still drying on my fingers from my last class. Dad, I said, I got in. Full ride. To Parsons. He blinked once. That design school thing? Does that even pay? Don't dream too big, Tammy. You're not Mason. I felt something break inside me that day. At Mason's mediocre internship announcement barbecue, I was handed a kitchen apron and asked to slice cucumbers. Carter got a rented basketball court for being player of the week. I got to do dishes while my scholarship went unnoticed. That's when I stopped trying to earn their pride. But I didn't stop working. I worked at a dusty bookstore on South Congress. Used my tips to pay for evening design classes. Bought a used laptop, taught myself Adobe Creative Suite, built a website, entered online competitions under a fake name, Tammy Lane. I didn't want their recognition anymore. I wanted their silence to echo. By 21, I was designing logos for local cafes. By 23, I launched a modest freelance brand studio from a shared co-working space. I called it Inspire because art could inspire and leave a mark. I didn't have an office or a team. Just me, a laptop, and a list of small business owners who were tired of being overlooked. And I was just like them. When my first full-service rebranding project went viral, a bakery called Clover and Crust, I cried in a parking lot. Not because anyone in my family noticed, but because I finally did. They still didn't know. Didn't know I'd built a growing agency. Didn't know the girl with the sketch pad was now a businesswoman with contracts. Didn't know that the companies their investments were starting to fear were hiring me. Because they never asked. For them, I was still Tammy. Drawing silly logos. Mason was now director of strategy at a mid-tier tech firm. Carter was flirting with minor league sports deals. Dad was still vice president at Orion Ventures, strutting around like Texas royalty. But I had something none of them did: momentum. And silence. You'd be surprised how powerful silence is when it's your choice. I quietly bought a car, a Lucent coupe, sleek, graphite gray, the same model Dad once called a dream car, then dismissed because it was too frivolous. I paid in full. No loan, no cosigner, no family. Then, without warning, I got a message from a contact at Orion Ventures. They needed a full rebrand. The firm had taken some PR hits, controversial investments, diversity lawsuits, the works. The board wanted fresh blood. Someone new. Someone quiet and effective. Guess whose agency had been anonymously recommended by 6 of the businesses Dad once ignored? Inspire. They didn't even realize they were hiring the daughter Douglas Evans had told, "Don't dream too big." I signed the contract under my legal name, Tammy Lane. Then I changed my last name, officially, and sent a simple message to the Evans family group chat. I'll be attending this year's Father's Day dinner. No context. No emojis. Just a warning shot. Next up, in part 2, Tammy arrives at the dinner. But this time, she isn't the girl in the corner seat anymore. The night of the Father's Day dinner, the air was humid with the kind of heat that wraps around your skin like a dare. I pulled up to the Evans estate in the Lucent coupe, graphite gray, polished to perfection. The exact model my father used to gawk at in dealership ads, whispering, "One day, maybe," before turning to praise Mason for landing a $10,000 marketing gig. I stepped out of the car not in heels too high to walk in or a designer label screaming for attention. Just a tailored ivory suit, hair pinned up in a smooth bun, no makeup, but confidence sharpened into every breath. The leather folder under my arm held one document. Just one, but it was enough to rip the roof off the illusion my family had spent years building. Dad saw me first. His eyes swept over the car, then narrowed when he looked at me really looked. Something flickered there. Confusion. Then irritation. Mason was already on the porch, his usual smug grin barely masking the superiority he wore like cologne. Carter barely looked up from his phone, already bored. "Tammy?" Dad said flatly. "You look different." I smiled. "Yes, I do." Inside, nothing had changed. The table was long and white linened. Crystal glasses, gold cutlery, everything screaming old wealth trying too hard. The house reeked of pride, soaked in cheap Cabernet and hollow conversations. Mason was in the middle of a dramatic retelling of a business dinner he had attended in Dallas. Carter was bragging about an upcoming campaign for a sports drink no one really drank. My mother, Lorraine, poured wine and smiled that tired smile women wear when their dreams were packed into their husband's briefcase decades ago. I sat at the far end. Just like always. Only this time, I wasn't shrinking into the corner. Dad raised his glass. To my sons, Mason, elevating the Evans name in corporate strategy, and Carter, a rising star in the athletic world. Then he glanced at me, and I swear, I saw it coming before he said it. And to Tammy, who, I assume, is still designing logos for bakeries. Hobbies are important, right? Mason snorted. "That's cute, actually." Carter muttered, "Some people like crafts, I guess." My fingers brushed the leather folder on my lap. I let the silence drag. Then I stood up. "I actually have something to add," I said, my voice low but steady. Dad waved a dismissive hand. "Tammy, let's not interrupt real conversations. We're talking business here." I smiled wider. "Exactly." I stepped to the center of the table and gently placed the folder in front of my father. "This is the signed contract between Orion Ventures and Inspire, granting full control of your company's branding, media representation, and executive messaging to us for 5 years. He blinked. "Us? My agency, Inspire. You might have heard of us. We've done the branding for Artisan Fresh, Bloom and Thorn, and now Orion." The silence was instant. Violent. Mason leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You're joking." I tilted my head. "Read it." Carter looked like he'd seen a ghost. My father picked up the paper, his hands trembling slightly. His lips parted, but no words came out. You see, Dad, I continued, starting today, your company's public face runs through me. Every PR statement, every campaign, every leadership announcement. If you want to speak to the world about Orion, you need my approval. The room was frozen. My mother stared, wine glass trembling. Mason opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I wasn't done. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. I thought I'd bring a guest. I sent a text. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Carter jumped. Mason scowled. Dad didn't move. My mother opened the door. It was Jonathan Price, legal director of Evercrest Holdings. He walked in with a thick white envelope. Mr. Evans, he said, placing the envelope in front of my father. Congratulations. Evercrest Holdings has acquired a controlling stake in Orion Ventures. And per the acquisition agreement, strategic authority now transfers to the agency responsible for Orion's brand rehabilitation. He turned to me and nodded. That would be Mississippi Tammy Lane. My father's mouth fell open. Mason gasped. You bought our company? Jonathan smiled. She didn't need to. She made Orion valuable enough to acquire. Then brought the buyer. He looked at Douglas, who was visibly shaking. As of this evening, Mr. Evans, you are relieved of executive authority. You'll serve in an honorary advisory role. All decisions now run through Mississippi Lane. Carter dropped his fork. Mason looked like he was about to throw his wine glass. But I stepped forward. To put it plainly, Dad, I'm your boss now. I paused, watching as his whole legacy cracked in his pupils. And I don't need your permission anymore. You'll need mine. His eyes were red. Not from rage, no, from something worse. Humiliation. I leaned in. That dream car you always talked about? The one parked outside? I paid in full. No loans. With money you said I'd never make. I turned toward the door. Happy Father's Day. I didn't need applause. I left them all at that long table, frozen in silence, their wine glasses filled with nothing but shame. I didn't get far from the table. Just as I reached the front hallway, I paused, then turned back, slow, steady, like someone flipping the last page of a book they had memorized. My heels tapped softly against the marble floor as I walked back into the dining room, where the air was now heavy with disbelief. Douglas Evans, my father, sat pale and speechless. Mason's jaw was clenched, his knuckles bone-white as he gripped the edge of the table. Carter looked like a boy who had wandered into a battlefield by mistake. My mother's hands were still folded on her lap, but they were trembling. I reached into my bag one last time. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out a second set of documents, this one in a crisp navy folder. I almost forgot. I walked over to my father's side and placed it directly in front of him. This is the ownership transfer of the Evans estate. His brow furrowed. What are you talking about? You mortgaged the house last year to help Orion's cash flow, remember? I said lightly. You thought no one would notice. But when Evercrest acquired Orion, well, that mortgage became part of the deal. I watched him struggle to comprehend. The collateral moved to the new parent company. And since the Orion brand was rebuilt through Inkspire's contract, the assets transferred under me. I let that sink in. This house is now mine. The silence turned suffocating. Mason stood abruptly, knocking his chair over. That's not possible. You can't own the house. Oh, but I do, I said calmly. It's all legal. All documented. You're free to read the fine print. Douglas looked like the floor had opened beneath him. This is my home. I built this. No, I replied, stepping forward, my voice sharp but steady. You built a shrine to your own ego. You filled it with trophies and photographs of your favorite sons. But you forgot to make space for your daughter. Carter finally spoke. You're seriously kicking us out? No, I said. I'm not that cruel. You can stay, for now. But you'll live knowing it's not your name on the deed anymore. It's mine. I turned to Douglas, the man who once told me, "Don't dream too big." You told me I'd never make money designing logos. That I should be realistic. Well, here's reality. I now own the company you dedicated your life to, and the house you kept me silent in. His lips parted. No words, just a faint shake of his head. Now, I added, stepping back, if you'll excuse me, I have a creative director meeting with Artisan Fresh, first thing tomorrow. Mason lunged forward, blocking the exit. Why would you do this, Tammy? What do you want? Revenge. No, I said without hesitation. This was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was always mine, my worth. He stepped aside slowly, his smugness replaced by something I'd never seen before. Fear. As I walked to the front door, I felt it, not triumph, not rage, but freedom. Like the kind of deep breath you take after holding it for years. And then I heard it. My father's voice. Broken. Quiet. She's not a failure. I paused, but didn't turn. She's everything, he said again, louder now. I looked over my shoulder. For the first time in my life, Douglas Evans looked up at me, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who had surpassed him. I should have seen it, he muttered. I should have seen you. No, I replied gently. You chose not to. I walked out into the night. The wind outside was cool against my face. I stepped into the driver's seat of the Lucent coupe, the engine humming softly to life. The dashboard screen lit up. Welcome back, Mississippi Lane. I smiled. No applause. No dramatic music. Just the soft rumble of a car I bought with hands that once trembled under the weight of being unseen. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I let the car coast through the winding streets of Austin, the same streets I used to walk with a sketch pad tucked under my arm and $5 shoes on my feet. Back then, I would stare at the tall buildings, the cafes, the offices, and wonder what it would feel like to belong in a place that mattered. Not just exist in the shadows of other people's lives. Tonight, I wasn't wondering anymore. I parked the car near the Colorado River, the same quiet overlook where I used to sit on weekends with a cold coffee and a borrowed laptop. My hands had trembled on those keys back then, not just from exhaustion, but from fear. Fear that everything I was building would collapse under the weight of being dismissed. Fear that my work wouldn't matter if my own family never believed in it. But the thing about silence, real silence, is that it teaches you something. If no one's clapping, you learn to become your own audience. You learn to value the process more than the praise. I remembered the nights I worked till dawn, eyes red from editing logos for local bakeries and candle shops. The times I cried in the back room of the bookstore after being told, again, that art doesn't pay bills. The time a client ghosted me on an invoice and I had to skip groceries for a week. And the worst of them all, bringing home an acceptance letter to Parsons and watching my father glance at it like it was a coupon for expired cereal. I learned how to endure in silence. But endurance alone doesn't make you dangerous. It's what you do with the silence. I turned that silence into skill. Learned Photoshop like it was a language. Learned branding like it was survival. Built relationships not through handshakes at cocktail parties, but through results no one could ignore. When local clients became loyal ones, and loyal ones referred bigger ones, Inkspire grew from a single woman's dream into a reputation. I built a portfolio that made people pause. Not because it screamed, "Look at me," but because it whispered, "This works." Every design I made, every brand I helped launch, was another invisible brick in the wall I was building between their mockery and my self-worth. But even as the business grew, I never once tried to make my family proud. Because somewhere along the line, I realized something terrifying and liberating. They never would be. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because their pride wasn't about me, it was about themselves. Mason was Dad's mirror. Carter was Dad's glory. I was just a reflection he didn't understand. And now I didn't need to be understood. I didn't need applause. I needed my own legacy. And that's what I had built. The next morning, I walked into Inkspire's new office, sleek, sunlit, with clean concrete floors and an entire wall filled with artwork from the small businesses we'd helped. On the far end, my team sat huddled around a mood board, debating font choices and color palettes. Chloe looked up and grinned. "You made the headlines." She tossed a folded newspaper across the table. Orion Ventures acquired by Evercrest, creative agency Inkspire named as strategic authority. My name wasn't in the article. That was intentional. I didn't need the credit. The power was enough. Ethan, our lead designer, let out a low whistle. "Can't believe we actually own them now." The irony. "Not own," I corrected. "We control the narrative. That's more powerful." He laughed. "Only you could say that and make it sound like war poetry." But it wasn't war. Not really. It was peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you stop trying to win over people who were never rooting for you. That night, I got a text from my mom. "Tammy, I don't know what to say. I just hope you're okay. We never knew you were hurting that much." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "I'm not okay. I'm better." It started as a quiet ripple. A week after the Orion announcement, I got a call from the Chronicle, a respected business publication that had previously passed on every pitch I sent in my early days. Now, they wanted an exclusive. Not just on Inkspire. On me. A young woman rebrands a major financial firm and flips the power dynamic on the very family that once ignored her? "That's not just news," the editor said. "That's a movement." I paused. For a long time, I'd dreamed of a moment like that, someone calling me, not Mason or Carter. Me. But now that it was here, I didn't feel pride. I felt measured. Controlled. "Send over your questions," I said. "But if you're hoping for a takedown story, I'm not interested in revenge porn. I don't need to destroy anyone. I just want to build things that matter." That interview, when it came out, didn't name my father or brothers. But the world read between the lines. The story was clear. A forgotten daughter quietly built an empire in the shadow of her family's arrogance, then bought the ground beneath their feet. Within 2 days, my inbox was flooded. Nonprofits, startups, schools, women's groups, people from small towns and major cities. All of them saying the same thing. "You made me believe it's possible." That was the first time I cried. Not from pain, from impact. But with visibility comes exposure. One evening, as I left a business panel, I was stopped by a man in a tailored suit near the valet stand. "Tammy?" I turned. It was Carter. He looked different, softer. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't surrounded by praise for once. Maybe it was the weight of a truth he could no longer outrun. "I wanted to say." "I didn't know," he said. "About how deep it all went." I tilted my head. "Didn't you? You were there at every dinner. Every celebration I was invisible in." He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't think it hurt you." "That's because you never asked." We stood in silence, the streetlights humming between us. "I lost my endorsement deal last week," he admitted. "When they found out Orion was restructuring, they pulled the plug." I nodded. "That's how consequence works." He didn't argue. Just looked at me like someone finally seeing a hurricane for what it really was, not noise, but force. "I'm sorry, Tammy." I almost believed him, but apologies don't change the past. They just prove someone's finally caught up to it. Mason didn't reach out. But he didn't have to. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a client who had worked with him. Apparently, he'd pitched a rebrand for their luxury apartment complex. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in taking over the project, quietly, of course. When I saw his design proposal, I had to smile. It was decent. Clean. Polished. But soulless. I declined the offer not because I couldn't do it better, but because I didn't need to chase his failures. Let him live with the echo of knowing I was the reason they hesitated. Let that be enough. Back at the office, Chloe burst into my workspace one morning holding her phone. "You're trending." I blinked. "Why? You didn't see it?" She pulled up a video. A stitched TikTok montage of me from the Chronicle article, side by side with clips of the Lucent coupe pulling up to the Evans estate, some grainy home footage someone leaked from that infamous Father's Day dinner, and a voiceover that said, "She wasn't loud. She was calculating. She didn't shout. She built. She didn't wait to be seen, she made them watch." It had over 2.1 million views. I sat down slowly. People had turned my story into a symbol. I hadn't planned that. But maybe it was time to stop hiding behind modesty. Maybe there was power in owning the spotlight, not for validation, but for example. Because if my silence used to be a prison, it had now become a sword. And then came the offer. A Fortune 500 company. National rollout. 7 figures. Inspire would lead the visual overhaul for a new sustainable product line. It was the kind of deal agencies dreamed about. But there was a catch. Orion Ventures, still licking their wounds, had to co-sponsor part of the launch, which meant my father would have to attend the joint press conference and defer to me on all public statements. I stared at the terms in my office. Ethan leaned in. "What are you going to do?" I took a breath. "I'm going to accept." Chloe blinked. Even with him on stage? Especially with him on stage. The auditorium was brighter than anything I'd ever stood under before. It wasn't the soft lighting of gallery nights or the warm golden glow of local cafes. This was white-hot stage lighting, meant to make people sweat, tremble, or shine. I wasn't sweating. I was ready. Behind me, the Inkspire logo pulsed gently on a massive LED screen. Minimalist, elegant, unmistakably mine. In front of me sat an audience of reporters, investors, influencers, and executives. A sea of cameras and sharp eyes. But I wasn't nervous. Because I wasn't pretending to be someone they'd respect. I had become someone they couldn't ignore. At stage left, my father stood stiff in a tailored suit, holding cue cards with trembling fingers. His name badge still read Douglas Evans, Strategic Advisor, Orion Ventures. Strategic Advisor. A title they gave old executives when they no longer had power but still had to smile. And today, his only job was to introduce me. He stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and stared down at the cards like they were in a foreign language. Then he looked up at me, and for a flicker of a second, I saw it again. Not resentment. Not disdain. Fear. Then he began to speak. "We're honored today to unveil a bold new partnership, one that reflects a commitment to innovation, authenticity, and inclusivity. The company responsible for the transformation of Orion's brand and our newest nationwide campaign is led by a woman of vision, a woman of perseverance, a woman I know very well." He paused. His voice cracked. "Please welcome Tammy Lane." The applause was thunderous. I walked across that stage, every step deliberate, like a full-circle moment taking form under my feet. I shook his hand not because I had to, but because I chose to, and that's what power looks like. I took the mic. "Thank you," I said, gazing into the crowd. "Thank you for being here. Today's campaign is about more than a product. It's about rewriting stories, not just in advertising, but in life." I turned slightly toward my father. Many of us were told we weren't enough, that our dreams were hobbies, that our voices didn't matter. But let me tell you something. When they stop listening, you build something so undeniable, they're forced to hear you. The room held its breath. Every small brand I've ever worked with, every candle shop, bakery, bookstore, taught me that greatness doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. I let the silence hang, then smiled. And that's what Inspire is here to do. More applause. The campaign went viral within hours. The quiet storm, they called it. The underdog brand led by the woman who had once been told she'd never make it. That night, I sat alone in the penthouse suite of a hotel I couldn't have even walked into 5 years ago. The skyline of Austin sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. On the table beside me sat a bottle of wine I hadn't opened and my phone, screen glowing with messages. One of them was from my mother. "Your speech, your poise. I've never seen your father so quiet. Tammy, I'm proud of you. I always was. I just didn't know how to show it. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need it anymore. Another message came through. From Mason. You proved your point. Loud and clear. I stared at it, then replied. I wasn't proving anything. I was just living. A week later, my father requested a meeting. I said yes. He showed up to my office, wearing a crisp blazer and a heavy expression. We sat across from each other, and for once, I didn't shrink in his presence. I waited for him to speak. I've lost everything, he finally said. No, I corrected. You lost the illusion that you controlled everything. He nodded slowly. You were always the one I didn't understand. Because you never tried. I see that now. I waited. No pity. Just silence. After a long pause, he looked me in the eye and said, I don't deserve a second chance. But if you ever need someone to support you, I'll show up. I leaned forward. Support isn't something you give after someone's already succeeded. It's something you offer when they have nothing. He closed his eyes, then stood. I'll never stop regretting it. As he walked to the door, I called after him. Dad. He turned. I forgive you. He didn't speak, but he nodded deeply like a man laying down armor he had carried too long. A few weeks later, I found myself back where it all began. South Congress. That tiny bookstore where I used to mop floors and sort return novels by candlelight. The sign was older now, faded from sun, but still standing. Inside, the shelves were full, the air thick with ink and dust and dreams people left behind in between pages. I stood in the very same back corner where I once sketched logo ideas on receipt paper, dreaming of a world beyond my last name. It looked smaller now. Or maybe I had just outgrown the pain that once kept me folded into its corners. The store clerk didn't recognize me. Why would he? To him, I was just another woman in a fitted blazer, picking up a copy of a book I'd read 1,000 times. But to me, I was standing in the place where my silence became purpose, where the ache of being unseen turned into the steel of resolve. That afternoon, I visited the old overlook by the river, my sacred thinking spot, where I'd cry over rejection letters and sketch branding ideas on my knees. Back then, I used to whisper promises to myself under my breath. One day, they'll see me. But now? Now, I didn't care who saw me, because I saw myself. And that was enough. I sat on the bench overlooking the water, pulled out my tablet, and opened a blank canvas. Not for a client. Not for a campaign. For me. I started to draw not logos, not ad mock-ups, but a girl. A young girl with messy hair, oversized hand-me-downs, and ink-stained fingers. She sat alone at a dinner table, holding a crumpled certificate, eyes wide with hope. I drew her face carefully, not with sadness, but with softness. Then I drew another image of that same girl, standing years later at a podium, her name glowing behind her, the same father who once ignored her sitting quietly in the crowd. When I finished, I stared at the piece and felt something crack open, not like pain, but like light pouring in through a wall I no longer needed. I named the piece, Self-Made Silence. The next month, I was invited to deliver a commencement speech at a women's leadership summit. I stood on stage not as Tammy Evans, daughter of Douglas, but as Tammy Lane, founder and CEO of Inkspire, one of the fastest-growing branding agencies in the Southwest. And this is what I told them. People will try to define you by the silence they force on you. They'll call your dreams hobbies. They'll make you feel like you need their permission to be great. But your worth isn't measured by applause. It's measured by what you build when no one's watching. So build quietly. Let your silence be your foundation. And when the time comes, let the world hear everything you became. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was sacred. I walked off stage into the wings and received a hug from a girl who couldn't have been older than 19. She whispered, "My dad says I'll never make it in fashion. He calls it playing dress up. But hearing your story." She paused, her voice cracking. "You made me believe I can prove him wrong." I looked her in the eyes and smiled. "You don't need to prove him wrong. You just need to prove yourself right." Back at the Inkspire office, Chloe handed me a stack of letters. Real letters. Handwritten. From clients. Viewers. Girls in small towns. Artists in big cities. Single moms. Quiet sons. People who had lived in the shadow of someone else's spotlight for far too long. They weren't thanking me for revenge. They were thanking me for reminding them they could choose themselves. I drove past the Evans estate one more time, not to look back with bitterness, but to honor the girl I once was, the one who waited at that long white linen table, begging for approval in silence. Now, I passed it with the windows down, sun on my face, no sadness in my chest. Because I wasn't circling that house anymore. I was moving forward. Tammy's journey wasn't just about building a business. It was about building herself, from the ground up, without applause, without validation, and without shortcuts. Her story reminds us that sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one you overlooked. The one who sat quietly, learning, preparing, not for revenge, but for freedom. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You just have to be undeniable. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Who in your life needs to hear this? Follow Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories of dignity, transformation, and poetic justice, where silence speaks louder than revenge.